Well, good morning, everyone. It is great. Thank you. Thank you. So how about that humidity this week, huh? Nice, yeah. How about that awkward transition into our weather, right? That was good, too. It is great to see you guys here. I'm so glad that you've chosen to join us this morning, especially on a beautiful day like today in the summer. And I just want to get right into it. Last week, Pastor Dave kicked off our summer-long teaching series called Summer School. And the big idea behind this series is simple. It's this, that when we stop growing, or when we stop learning, we stop growing. When we stop learning, we stop growing. And so over the next few weeks, we're going to try and tackle some how-to topics to help us grow and mature in our understanding and our wisdom so that we can better connect our faith in God to our real life, right? Every single one of us wrestle with and struggle with at some times, and it's not a bad thing at all. I do as well, more times than I'd like to admit, where I struggle with how does following Jesus, being a Christ follower, connect with my everyday life stuff? Like, how does that connect or integrate into being a good husband or being a good dad? How does it connect with how we look at money or how we spend our time? And so those are the kinds of things that we want to try and tackle this summer and really spark a bigger passion in our hearts for growing and for learning and for really developing a better understanding of how we integrate our faith in Jesus into our everyday life. So it's going to be good, and I want to start today with a summer school lesson of our own. And today's lesson, boys and girls, is going to be on the subject of buzzwords, okay? Buzzwords. Now, buzzwords are words or phrases that become culturally popular over the course of time. And I recently Googled top buzzwords of 2020, 2021, and it gave me a whole list, and I want to just quickly walk through a few of our culturally top buzzwords right now. The first one is unprecedented, okay? If you watch the news very often, you've probably heard this word more times than you care, right? Unprecedented. We live in unprecedented times, they say, all right? That's a big buzzword. Another buzzword, if you are in the corporate world, this is a big one. Circle back. Circle back. Okay, so you work in an office in a business place and you get an email from Gary who wants to circle back on a conversation you guys started a week ago, all right? That's a big term in the corporate world. Another buzzword is new normal. This is a big one in my world, in the church leadership world. Everyone's trying to discover what the new normal is going to be as we enter into this post-COVID society, right? And another big buzzword that I'm really guilty of, bandwidth. Anyone ever use this word? I do this word all the time. If you were to email me and ask me about doing something, I might say, I'll really have to see if I have the bandwidth for this. Or I'll ask somebody like, hey, Tyler, do you have the bandwidth to look at this project? And I use this word all the time, even at home, right? Crystal will ask me, hey, could you help me fold this laundry? And I'll say, I don't really think I've got the bandwidth for that right now, honey, while I'm watching the Bucks game with a tub of chips and guacamole on my lap, right? And a big one in our society right now is pivot. Pivot is a big one. Everyone's learning to pivot in our post-COVID world. Now, if you were around in the 90s, and you were a fan of the show Friends, you know good and well that the word pivot did not just arrive on the scene, okay? Pivot has been making waves in culture and society for years, right? This is truly one of the greatest scenes in television history right there. If you're not a fan of Friends, well, then we cannot be friends. I'm sorry to say that. And then lastly, according to Google, the most popular buzzword in 2021 is influencer. Influencer is the biggest one of them all. Now, the cultural definition for the word influencer is this. It's someone who has the power or the ability to affect or change a person's habits or actions. Now, oftentimes, an influencer is someone who uses YouTube or social media to affect or change your buying habits, your fitness habits, your thought habits, thought patterns, or how you just interact with others within your community. That is what a quote-unquote influencer does. And the funny thing about this is that the word so many people have deemed themselves as influencers in our society that the word is quickly losing its meaning, right? nobody really knows who or what is an influencer anymore. And if you ask people, younger people in their 20s, and you say, ask them about the word influencer, they'll probably roll their eyes because they're so sick and tired of hearing people say, I'm an influencer, right? Well, in the idea of being an influencer is nothing new. In fact, when we go back 85 years or so to 1936, there was a book that was written that very few people thought would make waves in this country, and it made waves throughout the world. It's written by Dale Carnegie, and it's called How to Win Friends and Influence People, right? Most of us, if not all of us, have heard of this book at some point. This book has sold 30 million copies. 30 million copies. And in fact, Time magazine, back in 2011, they created a list of the 100 most important, not like popular, but the most important books ever written. And they have this book as number 19. Number 19. Just one notch above my book, okay? No, I'm teasing. My book that I've never written. But Carnegie's book continues to impact people today. And the question is why? Why would a book written in 1936 sell 30 million copies and still to this day make waves in our society? I personally think it's because every single person wants to know, they wonder, can I make a difference? Can I be a person of influence in my family or in my neighborhood or in my workplace or in my community? So many people want to know, can I make a difference? And let's pause real quick, because I want to say that here's the good news, every single person in this room, regardless of your age, your economic status, your background, whatever your life story is, has the ability and the power to be a person of influence. You all have the ability to make a lasting difference in this community, in your family, in your workplace, or in your neighborhood. Now, do you need to go out and start a TikTok account right now? Or change your Instagram bio to influencer? Please don't, okay? We don't need more of that, right? You don't need to do that because influence never starts with the position of what we appear to be like on the outside. It never starts with the position of our lives. It starts here, the heart. Influence starts here. And if we want to know how to win friends and influence people in our world, or here in Racine, Wisconsin, I think there's no better place to start than to look at the life and the teachings of Jesus and see what he had to say about it. So I want to take you back to a story where Jesus finds himself being a dinner guest at someone's house. This someone was a Pharisee. Now, Pharisees in the New Testament were people of authority. They were men, educated men, wealthy. They were religious leaders, and they had a lot of power and authority. So it was a big deal to be invited to their house for dinner. And while Jesus is there, he's noticing that there are other guests who are trying to maneuver themselves. They're trying to kind of maneuver and get their way so that they can sit at the most important seats at the table. And he would use that experience later on while he's teaching some of his followers. And he uses this as a parable, and we find it in Luke chapter 14, where Jesus says, when you are invited to a wedding feast, don't sit at the best place. Someone more important may have been invited. Then the one who invited you will come and say, give your place to this other guest. You will be embarrassed, and you will have to sit in the worst place. It's like being demoted to the kids' table, all right? When you are invited to be a guest, go and sit in the worst place. Then the one who invited you may come and say, my friend, take a better seat. You will then be honored in front of all the other guests. If you put yourself above others, you will be put down. But if you humble yourself, you will be honored. Now, when I read this, I often think of imagery when I read the scriptures, and I try to paint a picture of what that looks like in real life. So when I read this parable, I immediately go to a time and a place when our 4 kids were much younger than they are now. We have a picture of them when they were younger right there, right? Weren't they cute, And now I've got 2 in high school, 1 in middle school, and Brooklyn here, she's halfway done through elementary already. Time is just flying by. But when they were younger, in this age, I can remember vividly Crystal and I going out to dinner somewhere, and if the host had chosen to seat us at one of those corner booths, you know what I'm talking about, right? A corner booth, where there's that awkward middle spot that you're kind of trapped in, the inside, nobody wants to sit in there. I can remember my two older boys wrestling and fighting, trying to get to the outside so that they didn't get stuck on the inside, right? For some reason, they thought sitting on the outside was the cooler, better spot to sit. And it always created chaos and always created drama because Brooklyn and Taylor had to find a way to go over or under them. And it was just kind of like, why do we even go out to eat anymore as a young family, right? And so that's what I think of when I hear Jesus telling this story about people positioning themselves to get a better seat. And I love this imagery that Jesus is using here to teach his point. And the point he's making is this, guys, that our influence doesn't start with the position of our lives. Influence starts with the posture of our hearts. That's where influence begins, is with the posture of our hearts. And today, if you Google, top buzzwords, you're never going to find the words humble or humility on any of those lists. Not because it's a forgotten word. It's more like a word that's become disdained in our society, where we no longer want to strive for humility or to be humble. Because the word humble, for whatever reason, now has negative or weak connotations to it. That if you're humble, that it's somehow a negative thing, or that you're a weak person. So I'll use this as an example. When you hear a business person, a very successful business person, tell their story of how they rose to the top, he or she might say that they came from humble beginnings. What's the first thing we think of when you hear someone say they came from humble beginnings? Poor. That they were poor. That at some point in their life, they had nothing. Maybe they were homeless, or they came from a really messed up, broken family, and they were determined to make a success out of their lives, and now they run this Fortune 500 company, but they look back on their life and they say, I came from humble beginnings, meaning I was poor. We equate humility and being humble with something that's negative. I also hear many times people, and I'm guilty of this myself, when we receive a compliment for something that we've achieved or we've done, we kind of push it back. We kind of push the compliment back at the person because we somehow don't want to receive the compliment, that it's a negative thing to acknowledge our compliments or that we've done something really, really well, right? So in reality, the modern day beliefs of what humility is are far from what the biblical definitions of humility are, because when Jesus talks about being humble or when he talks about humility, he doesn't tie it to weakness or anything negative. He will always tie it to words like greatness and honor. Greatness and honor. So as we explore this idea of what it looks like to win friends and influence people with humility, let's start with this. Let's start with looking at what humility is not. Okay? Two things real quickly that humility is not, that we have to understand, that we have to embrace. Humility, number one, is not having a low self-esteem. It is not having a low self-esteem. It is not thinking less of yourself. Jesus, most, if not everybody, would agree, lived a very humble life. He was a humble person. His actions were from a place of humility. Yet did you know that he also walked around everywhere he went telling people that he was one with God? If I walked around this church and said, I'm one with God, you would think I'm either crazy or that my ego is completely out of control, right? This was not, to say he was one with God is not coming from a person who struggled with a low self-esteem, yet everyone knows that Jesus was a humble person. You see, there's this balance. There's this balance in how we should think of ourselves. If we think too highly of ourselves, that will eventually lead to pride. But if we think too lowly of ourselves, we are likely to miss and never embrace our true God-given strengths and abilities and talents, the person that he created us to be. And I like what the Apostle Paul says when he wrote this letter to the Romans nearly 2,000 years ago. And he says, don't think you are better than you really are. Be honest in your evaluation of yourselves. In other words, Paul is saying, he's challenging us, be real with yourself. Be real with yourself. If I stood up here and spewed off all of my accomplishments and all the things that I'm really good at and all the ways that God has gifted me, all right, you're probably going to be turned off by that. And I'm not going to really influence anybody. But the same can be said if I stood up here and I started to spout off all the things that I'm not good at. I'm not good at this, I'm not good at this. It's not fair that you people are good at these things and I'm not, and I don't have the same talents and I've never really accomplished anything in my life. Talk about a downer. I'm not going to win friends or influence a lot of people with that kind of mindset either. But when we're real with ourselves, as Paul says, when we live in this balance of being confident in what gifts and strengths and abilities God's given us, while being honest about the things that we are not, the gifts and the strengths and the talents that God has not given us, that's humility. That's humility. Live in the balance of being confident in who God created you to be in your world, in this world, and who God did not create you to be, and you have humility. Now, the second thing is humility is not a lack of ambition. Humility is not a lack of ambition. I am genuinely, honestly afraid that too many people have this belief, they've convinced themselves, that if they surrender their lives to becoming a follower of Jesus, they surrender their lives to God's grace, his love, and they say, yes, I'm going to embrace this Christian life and I'm going to follow Jesus, that somehow means that I now have to give up. I have to give up all my desires to be successful. I have to give up any desires to achieve things or to be driven as a person or to have goals or to even make lots of money. That you have to give up all of that. What Jesus taught is that in following him, we surrender our entitlement to these things. We surrender like that. This is my right. It's my right to be rich. It's my right to be powerful. We give up our entitlement to these things. But nowhere are we taught that we give up our ambitions or we give up our desires to be driven or successful in life. And I use this story as a way to kind of connect this, that there was a time where Jesus, two of his disciples, James and John, they had a question for Jesus. Yet these two grown men, for some reason, were afraid to ask Jesus, so they did what every grown man does. They went and got their mom to ask Jesus for them, okay? Two total mama's boys. And you can read it in Matthew chapter 20. But these mama's boys, two of Jesus' disciples, they want to know, can they have powerful positions in God's kingdom, meaning in heaven one day? And so they got their mom to ask Jesus the question. And in Scripture it says that she approached Jesus, she knelt before him, and she asked, can my sons have important positions in your kingdom? And Jesus basically says, you don't even know what you're asking, lady. And he kind of rebukes her because that's not how God's kingdom works. It's not through power of or position or self-importance. In fact, he doesn't even rebuke her or the disciples for the ambition. There's nothing wrong with their ambition to be great in God's kingdom. What he wants them to understand is this, that the path to greatness in my kingdom is not through self-importance. It's not through positions of power or authority. It is through the posture of our hearts. It is through humility. That is the path to greatness in God's kingdom. But we don't see him rebuke their ambition, because being humble or living with humility has nothing to do with surrendering our ambitions. I firmly believe this, friends, that when we see that Jesus doesn't want us to give up these things, but rather he is inviting us every single day of our lives to weave him into every fabric of our life including our ambitions and our goals and all these things, that we will discover, and I promise you will, that we will discover that will ultimately bring so much more value and meaning to our ambitions and to our goals and to our successes. That if you're a driven person, you will find more meaning and more purpose in your drivenness when Jesus is involved in it, because we begin to look at this world and our lives through the lens of Christ. So those are the two things of what humility is not. It is not about having a low self-esteem. It is not about lacking ambition. Let's look at what humility is. Humility, if I could just capture it in one way, if I could narrow it down to one thing, humility is simply this: serving others. Serving others. Now, if you're hoping for some big TED Talk, mic drop moment where I open your eyes to a whole new world of the meaning of humility, I've greatly disappointed you. I'm sorry. But at the core, humility is always about serving others. It's about ourselves and every other person being on the same level playing field. And as I look out into this room, I see all these people and I see different levels of status. We all have different incomes. We all have different jobs. We all have different things that we've accumulated in life. We all have different positions in the business world, right? None of us are the same. But we need to see each other in the terms of humanity, our humanity on the same level playing field, that every single person in this room is worthy of being served. That's where humility starts. And in just a moment, I want to use a teaching from the Apostle Paul to really help kind of set a foundation for what I envision the Racine campus of Great Lakes Church doing to win friends and influence people through humility. Now, the Apostle Paul, if you're new to the Bible, much of the New Testament was written by the Apostle Paul. He was sort of like a pastor from a distance who helped these groups of people in these regions of the world at that time who were new to Christ. They were first century Christians, and they're trying to understand what it means to integrate their faith now in Jesus with real life and what it means to be sort of a newly organized church. And they had all kinds of issues and problems with this, as you can imagine they would, and it was messy. And so he would write these letters to encourage them and to teach them and to help them get organized, for lack of better words. He was like a pastor to them from a distance. And one of the things that he wrote about was to the group in the Philippian church. And I want to read this. And again, I want to use this as sort of a vision for us as a campus. He says this: don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. Don't look out only for your own interests, but take interest in others too. Historically and traditionally, the church has always been about finding ways to tell their community, to tell their city, hey, all of you, come here to find hope. Come here. You are invited to come here to find hope. And then we gather in small and medium and large-sized crowds, and we sing songs. We worship Jesus through singing songs. We build friendships through community, and we learn about how to live the Christian life through a sermon or a message or a talk, as we kind of call them here at Great Lakes Church. And that's sort of what makes up the church. And let me say this: there's nothing wrong with that model of church. In fact, I think Great Lakes Church does this very authentically and with great intention. And I'm proud to be a pastor here that every single week we open our doors to the community and say, hey, you're invited. Come here. Come here to find hope. I'm proud of that. But it was exactly 1 year ago where we were in the middle of the long COVID shutdown. We all remember that, right? We were in the middle, including Great Lakes Church, completely shut down. We were in the middle of a 5-month-long journey where we as a church were learning how to be an online-only church. And guys, there's no other way to say it. It sucked. It was terrible, all right? Here's the honest truth. The first couple weeks were kind of fun, being on Facebook and commenting, By month 3, I was barely clothed in my kitchen, right? Just like sitting there at the table pushing like, and just like, oh my gosh, this is so boring. I hate this, right? I was depressed. I was upset. I was frustrated. I was not doing well with this long shutdown, just like a lot of you were, because COVID took something from all of us in some way, shape, or form. And while I love that our online campus, our online presence is making an impact and it's growing and we're going to continue to invest in it, it was hard when that's your only way of doing church. It was hard for me. And it was during this time that I began to ask God to show me how he might want me to pastor this campus, this church differently whenever we reopen, whenever that might happen. And over the course of that time, he began to really put just a bigger burden on my heart for Racine, Mount Pleasant, and really the whole county. And it wasn't just because of COVID and being shut down. We were in the middle, and in some ways we still are, in the middle of a massive societal upheaval and change. We had COVID. We had political polarization before the election, never seen before in our country. We had racial tensions happening all around the country, and our country was just in a mess. And in some ways, that upheaval is still happening today. And some of it's been struggle, and some of it's been very necessary and very good, in my opinion. And it was during this time where I began to look at some of the church history, and there are these church historians who are way smarter than me, who say that we haven't, as a country, seen this kind of change and upheaval since the late 1960s. And what followed the late 1960s was a massive spiritual awakening to God in our country. And I believe that we're going to see that again. But it was a culmination of all these things that caused me to start to wrestle with, how do we want to do church when we reopen? And it was during this time that I knew if I could change one way that we do church at the Racine campus, it would be through serving our community more consistently. That would be it. Our mission partnerships and all the money that we generously give to our mission partnerships are part of our foundation as a church. It's part of who we are, and those things are always going to change, and they are always going to be there, and it's amazing. I love them. But I knew that God was challenging me to lead us to having a more local presence where we not only say, hey, come to us to find hope, but we as a community, as a church, would be people who are willing to go out and say, let us bring hope, let us bring peace, let us bring love, and humbly serve others throughout Racine. And so we reopened in August. I want to say it was the middle of August. It's all kind of a blur, right? But we reopened, and it was so exciting to reopen and be in person again, and I was ready to introduce this idea of serving the community and all these things. And then reopening was kind of like way harder than we thought it was going to be. First of all, hardly anybody was here, okay? Hardly anybody. We had all these cleaning protocols in place and very few volunteers, and it was a struggle. It proved to be harder than we thought, despite the excitement of being in person again. But it was hard. Right after that, we had the Jacob Blake shooting in Kenosha and all of the unrest that came with that. And we took the entire month of September to unify our campuses, to pray. We had prayer meetings here every week, and we had teams go out to Kenosha and serve in Kenosha and to help rebuild our city and our area, right, to bring hope to Kenosha. And it just wasn't a good time. It wasn't a good time. Well, then Christmas came. And Christmas is the busiest time for all of us, right, especially in the church world. We're always busy here around Christmas time with all the services we do. And if you want to fail at something in the church world, try and start something new in December, okay? That's an automatic fail. It will fail, guaranteed. So I wasn't going to do it then. So as the new year settled in, January was here, 2021, I was like, okay, feeling good, and let's go. Let's get this thing launched and move forward. At 3 a.m. on February 14th, I got a call from the fire department saying that a pipe had broke, a big pipe, had broken this campus and that it flooded parts of the building. And I was just like, yay, let's go see what happened, right? And so I drove down here, and by 6 a.m., that morning, by 6 a.m. that morning, the roof had collapsed and causing near catastrophic damage to about 1/3 of our building. So if you're new around here, about 6 feet beyond this plastic wall was the first I-beam that went. I was standing right back there when it happened, and it sounded like someone shot a cannon in this room, okay? To say it scared me, it was like a big-time understatement, okay? And it was an absolutely chaotic event and day, and hearing and seeing the roof collapse here. And so my point is this. This thing called life was happening. And I had the choice to either wait for the exact perfect time to start something new, to take a risk here with the church, or we could just do this thing. Because let's be real. In life, there's never a perfect time to start something new or to take a risk. There just isn't. At some point, you have to choose to say, today, I'm going to take a step forward and I'm going to start. We're going to begin. So this summer, my hope for us is to act on the words of Paul, the teachings of Paul. And let me read it to you again. He says, don't look out only for your own interests, but take an interest in others too. Friends, I don't want us to be a community, a church who only looks out for our interests, who only says, come to us. But I want to be a church that says we exist to go out to Racine as well. I dream for us to be people who take interest in the needs of our community and lovingly tries to meet those needs by humbly serving others. Because that, my friends, is what I believe Jesus wants for us in terms of winning friends and influencing people. So the question is, how do we do this? How do we do this? Well, for the purpose of just giving something a name so that it's recognizable and people know when they see it on the website or they hear us talk about it, we've just kind of called this idea Saturday Serve. Saturday Serve. So in the future, when you hear me or someone on stage talk about Saturday Serve, you know that this has to do with us being outside of the four walls of this church and in the community somewhere. And the idea is this: on the last Saturday of each month this summer, we will join forces with others in Racine to serve our community for the purpose of bringing peace and love and hope and the good news of Jesus to those who need it, to serve people in tangible ways. And let me give you a glimpse into what our plans are for this summer. Again, we're only starting with the summer. But in 2 weeks, we have our first Saturday Serve, and that is with our good friends at Kingdom Builders. We love Kingdom Builders here. In fact, if you want to learn how to humbly serve the needs of the community, Kingdom Builders are the example. Nobody in the county of Racine does it better than Kingdom Builders. And so we've invested a lot of money into Kingdom Builders as one of our partnerships, but they are hosting a maximum strength youth outreach that we want to come alongside them and partner with them in serving the youth of Racine. So why this particular opportunity? The idea is this: it's a great opportunity for us to further develop our mission with Kingdom Builders because, again, they do this very, very well. And it's a fun way for us to work together in serving underserved youth of Racine through having an event that involves music, sporting events like basketball tournament, dodgeball tournament, lots and lots of food, prizes, and just a brief message of encouragement for their lives, and a great event to bring hope to the lives of students and young people. And the big reason for why is this: too many youth, too many teenagers here in Racine have this mindset that this is a community to escape rather than a community to help build and a community to thrive in. And I know a lot of us, when we were 18, we thought, I can't wait to get out of this town, wherever you came from, right? There's nothing new about that concept. But it is prevalent here in Racine. When I talk to community leaders, people talk about generational hopelessness. They talk about how it's almost systemic here in Racine, this idea of young people wanting to escape this place rather than build something that they can thrive in. And I don't have a bunch of time to talk about all the reasons why we could categorize so many young people as being underserved teenagers. But the overarching reason is this generational hopelessness. Too many people have been fed this lie, and they believe this lie that there is no hope for them here, or that there is no purpose for them here. And we, along with Kingdom Builders, want to do our part in helping change that through one event to try and change that. And so there are some specific ways that we as a campus, we as a church can help. Be as specific as we need a couple nurses to be on site to manage any kind of injuries that might happen or something like that. Or we need grill masters or people who want to serve food to these students, people who want to help with the setup and the teardown of the event, people who want to just hang out with students, who want to just be there as a presence to say, I'm with you on this thing, and I want to encourage you, and you've got purpose, and we as a church, we love you guys and all these things. So that's the point of this Saturday serve with Kingdom Builders. Then in July, we will have a Saturday serve with Racine Habitat for Humanity. If you've never done a Habitat build, it is so incredibly rewarding. And in a few weeks, the new executive director for Habitat for Humanity will be here, and we'll interview him and talk about their vision for how we can partner with them. And then on August 28th, partner with Gifford School to help them get ready for the upcoming school year. A few short hours, once a month, to humbly show interest in others, as Paul commanded us to do, and to show Racine through our actions that we are for you. That Racine, we are for you. And I believe that this summer can be a launching pad for something incredible, that years from now, Saturday serves will be an amazing thing, that there won't just be a team of people serving, helping at Gifford School, but there will be teams of people helping at 5 or 6 different schools around the community at one time, at Park High School, at Jerstead Middle School, at Racine Lutheran School, all these schools around to make an impact and to say to the community, we're for you, and we're going to choose to bring hope to this city. That's the hope. That's the dream. And I know that this is a different kind of talk than what we usually give here. But as my favorite preacher is, I look nothing like him, but it's T.D. Jakes. T.D. Jakes has a great way of saying sometimes you got to preach the announcements. Sometimes you got to preach the announcements. And I wanted to get this into the hearts of all of us at the church here, that Saturday Serve will be part of our DNA. It'll be part of who we are as a church. And this summer will be our launching pad for it. And so there's different ways that if you want to participate in our upcoming 1 and 2 weeks with Kingdom Builders, you can use your connection card. You can write your name, email, and write Saturday Serve on it. Drop it in the blue recycling bin, and we'll send you the link to get signed up. Or you can go to an app or a website, go to the events page, and you'll see it right there. Click the link, and you sign up. It's super easy. It just reserves your spot so we know who's coming. But would love to have you join us on this first Saturday Serve. If you have any questions, ask me afterwards. But guys, here's the deal. Bigger picture thing. Jesus says that if you want to influence people, if you want to win friends in your circle, in your world, in your neighborhoods, in your workplace, within your family, around your friendships, if you want to influence people, it never starts with the position of our lives. It starts with the posture of our hearts. Influence is about serving others through humility. So whether you choose to serve at a Saturday Serve or not, I hope and I pray that we as a church will be known for our humility throughout the county. That we will be a church that is known throughout Racine for our humility, for our willingness and our ability to see everybody as people willing to be served. Let's pray. Jesus, I am so thankful for this beautiful day you've created for us, and I'm so grateful for this church and the way that you have for years have put it on people's hearts to serve and to be radical with their generosity and to love people with so much grace and so much love and so much acceptance. And I just pray that you would take this dream, this vision of Saturday Serve and build it, and it would be a foundation for years to come of making an impact right here in Racine County in tangible ways. That we would be a church who's willing to go out and not just come in. And that we would look out for the interest of others this week, starting today. We would look out for the interest of others and to humbly be willing to serve other people. Help us, God, to be great influencers in our world and done through a posture of humility. We thank you, God, for what you're doing in this church. I thank you for all my friends who are here today. May you bless them, God, and have favor over them as they go about this week. In your name I pray. Amen.